Project 6, we had the years 1975 through 1994.
In 1975, the Vietnam War ended. The U.S. had invested about $168 billion into this war, along with many U.S. factories switching products to produce ammunition for the military. This caused inflation in the States, and without an increase in taxes or spending, the U.S. dollar became weak. The 1980s recession was a big hit to the global economy, but it was also very bad in the U.S. The recession was started by a weak monetary policy. Unemployment had been healthy at 3.2%, but it was raised to 5.1%, 7.5%, and worst of all was 13.5% in North Dakota. Black Monday happened on October 18, 1987, when the DOW stock, which is weighed at an average of 30 significant stock points, crashed by 22.68%. This caused a huge loss in investments, and some workers even lost their jobs. The Gulf War was started in 1990 and ended in 1991. The U.S. spent around $60 billion in this war. The overseas money caused a huge spike in oil prices. After the Gulf War, the U.S. economy experienced an economic boom. From 1991 to 1992, the U.S. had major growth in its GDP.
American families affected by the economic events of 1975 to 1994. The impact of the Gulf War, about 150,000 United States Americans were deployed during this time, which left families without a father and mothers, but they were insured with many benefits. These benefits include disability, compensation, pension, education and training, health, home loans, insurance, rehabilitation, and employment. The impact of Vietnam, the lack of taxation caused double-digit inflation amounts during debt that ravished the American economy and eroded living standards from the late 1960s into the 1990s. There were almost no financial aid for the families of the 5,800 who died and 500,000 who were injured. The impact of the 80s recession. Before the recession, the employment was at 5.1 in January of 74, but in May of that year it jumped to 9%. The employment rate in some states got to 14.5 in multiple states before hitting a 10.8 employment rate nationally. On Black Monday, the stock market fell 22.68% in the United States. Investment in the stock were lost, and many workers lost their jobs. In 1990s, the United States boom. On average, 2.35 million jobs were created per year starting in 1990 and ending in 2000. On average, the GDP was $8.27 trillion, which was an increase about $2 trillion from the 80s.
How did the government cause and respond to the economic events in 1975 through 1974? A weak economy in 1975 caused by government because they sent majority of money overseas. 1980s recession caused unemployment. This is caused by the government not giving wounded veterans an opportunity or enough money to live when back from the Vietnam War. After the 1989 Black Monday, the government set new rules called trading curbs. Trading curbs allowed exchange to temporarily halt trading in instances of exceptionally large price declines. The 1990 economic boom was caused by GDP increase continuously for almost 10 years.
How did businesses respond? Businesses mostly just started to fire employees. And in the 1980s recession, businesses bankruptcies increased by 50%. And Black Monday really didn't affect American families because not a lot of people were invested in stocks, while the Gulf War made taxes go up. And in the Vietnam War, businesses changed the producing for the war, changing for some businesses' production. How did businesses' responses affect the American family? Since about 650,000 people were deployed for the Gulf War, employment rates went down, and but after the 80s recession, the employment rate was at 9%, and then people were heavily taxed. But in the 1990s, businesses were and government hired about 2.3 million jobs, which caused the GDP to increase about 2 trillion from the 1980s.
Overall, the U.S. economy from 1975 to 1994 was pretty healthy, except for the 1980s recession. Overall, the employment rate and inflation rate compared to other time periods was not bad.